Gettysburg became the legend. Vicksburg was the strangulation. By early May of 1863, Fremantle had crossed Texas and reached the edge of a different war. The first lessons had been border violence, cotton roads, distance, scarcity, and the strange local autonomy of a society under pressure. Now he was moving toward the artery. The Mississippi River was not simply a river. It was the spine of the continent. Whoever controlled it could split the Confederacy, isolate the trans-Mississippi West, reopen commercial movement, and make the South's geography turn against itself. Fremantle did not yet know exactly how close Vicksburg was to disaster. But almost every mile eastward tells him the same thing. The rivers are closing, the roads are filling with refugees, and the Confederate command system is trying to concentrate after the enemy has already moved faster. The episode begins at Galveston, because Galveston shows the River War in miniature. On May 2nd, Fremantle reaches the island city. It is blockaded, under military law, and partly deserted. The Federal ships are visible offshore. The shallow bay is defended by works, piles, torpedoes, and obstacles. The wrecks of the Confederate cotton steamer Neptune and the Federal Westfield sit near the wharves. Earlier that year, Magruder had retaken Galveston with a night attack. He placed field pieces along the wharves and opened fire on Federal vessels at close range. The artillery attack nearly failed. Then the cotton-clad steamer Bayou City helped capture the Harriet Lane, and Federal confusion turned a near disaster into a Confederate success. Fremantle gives Magruder credit for audacity. But the scene matters for a larger reason. The Confederacy is using cotton bales, river steamers, field guns, improvised defenses, and nerve to compensate for the Union's naval power. This is not a navy against a navy. It is improvisation against industrial pressure. At Galveston, Fremantle watches Pyron's regiment embark to meet Banks. The unit is a picture of Confederate strength and weakness together. Determined men, but dressed in every variety of costume and carrying every variety of weapon. Some have Enfield rifles. Others have shotguns, carbines, long rifles, six-shooters, and Bowie knives. A 14-year-old boy has already served through the Arizona campaign. The men look brave. The equipment looks uneven. That is a recurring Fremantle pattern. Courage in abundance, system in shortage. On May 4th, he leaves Houston for Navasota, then takes the stage toward Shreveport. The war is now visible as displacement. Federal pressure under Banks is pushing planters, families, slaves, soldiers, and rumor westward. Roads are alive with people running property out of danger. The prices are absurd. Boots at $100, a wide-awake hat at $40, a sword at $225. Meals of bacon, cornbread, and buttermilk cost $1. Confederate substitutes replace coffee. Men complain of their own troops not taking what they need on the march. This is what a collapsing logistics system feels like from inside the stagecoach. Not one catastrophe, but 1,000 small distortions in daily life. Fremantle is still traveling, but the war has stopped being distant. Every road is carrying someone away from Banks, someone toward Vicksburg, someone ruined by raids, someone trying to rejoin an army. The Confederacy is no longer just defending territory. It is trying to keep its own movement from becoming panic. On May 8th, after nearly a month crossing Texas, Fremantle reaches Shreveport and calls on General Kirby Smith, who commands the Confederate department west of the Mississippi. Shreveport is now a displaced capital of sorts. Louisiana's legislature has shifted there from Baton Rouge, but not enough members have arrived to do business. The Red River is broad and fast, navigable by large steamers and suddenly full of strategic anxiety. Kirby Smith advises Fremantle to go toward Monroe and try to cross the Mississippi from there. Alexandria is uncertain. Federal movement has made the direct route dangerous. This is the shape of the River War. The map is not fixed. Routes open and close with rumors, gunboats, raids, and couriers. By May 10th, Fremantle reaches Monroe. News arrives from everyone he meets. Alexandria has fallen. Walker's division, 8,000 strong, has started down the Ouachita toward the Red River, then turned back after reports of Federal gunboats. Monroe is in confusion, full of soldiers and officers. General Hebert gives Fremantle shelter and tells him crossing the Mississippi may be impossible. The reason is simple. Gunboats. Federal vessels have forced their way past Vicksburg and Port Hudson. They are reported in the Mississippi, the Red River, perhaps near the mouth of the Ouachita. A small fort at Harrisonburg may be the only obstacle keeping them from appearing in front of Monroe. Now the river becomes a hunting ground. Fremantle also hears that Vicksburg is about 80 miles away and that Yankee deserters have come from the army besieging it. Lee's victory at Chancellorsville has just arrived as news, but even that victory cannot change the geography here. In Virginia, Lee may have won. In Mississippi and Louisiana, the rivers are tightening. On May 11th, Fremantle boards a steamer for Harrisonburg. The captain is disgusted by the expedition and expects to meet a gunboat around every bend. The boat moves down a beautiful but dangerous river 200 to 300 yards. Wide, deep, tortuous, with trees growing to the edge. Then a mounted courier shouts from the bank, "There are fighting at Harrisonburg." The captain turns green. Some passengers joke about making a fight of it with Enfields if a gunboat appears. Fremantle is relieved that this insanity does not catch on. News comes in fragments, gunboats driven back, still fighting, courier line uncertain. The steamer ties to a tree at night, head upstream ready to run. This is not the clean war of official dispatches. This is operational fog at river speed. No one knows enough. Everyone knows something. Decisions are made from shouted fragments on a muddy bank. On May 13, Fremantle finally reaches Harrisonburg and sees Confederate success. Fort Beauregard, stronger than expected, has repulsed 4 Federal gunboats. The fort stands on a hill above the town, facing a long river reach. The gunboats demanded unconditional surrender. Colonel Logan treated the demand with contempt. The ships opened fire on Sunday afternoon and continued for hours, throwing roughly 150 heavy shells. They renewed the attack Monday, then withdrew, one vessel reportedly crippled. The fort fired only about 45 smoothbore 32-pound shots. Only 3 men in the garrison were wounded. It is a local victory, and everyone is elated. But even in victory, the river shows its power. The town suffers because it lies between vessels and fort. Nearby Trinity has just been visited by gunboats that destroyed molasses and rum and carried away a few slaves. The Mississippi itself remains infested with Federal vessels. A fort can stop a raid. It cannot reopen a continent. Harrisonburg was a Confederate win, but it did not solve the problem. The Union did not need to win every bend in every river. It needed to keep pressure on the system until movement became dangerous, supplies became uncertain, and commanders could not connect fast enough to save one another. The next day, Fremantle experiences the river war at human scale. Because the Louisiana bank of the Mississippi is flooded, and because the river is full of enemy gunboats, the party cannot simply travel by road. They leave Trinity in a yawl and 3 skiffs, then force their way through swamps and bayous. They row, drag boats, get into water up to their middles, cross lakes, get lost, go aground, and push through thickets. The distance in Fremantle's skiff is about 28 miles. It takes 11 hours. This is the reverse of grand strategy. On a map, crossing from the Ouachita country toward Natchez looks like a line. On the ground, it is alligators, snakes, rain, mud, sweat, logs, and a black oarsman named Tucker, whose strength keeps the party moving. At the end of it, they trudge 3 more miles through deep mud to Vidalia, opposite Natchez. That night, they are warned that Federal gunboat crews sometimes land there, and the soldiers should be ready to bolt into the woods. On May 15th, Fremantle crosses the Mississippi and reaches Natchez. He thinks the worst may be over. It is not. Natchez is beautiful, but full of gloomy rumors. Another Federal raid seems to have hit the interior of Mississippi. Railroads are damaged. It is doubtful whether Fremantle can reach Vicksburg at all. Still, he pushes inland toward Brookhaven, hiring a carriage with others determined to go forward. Every traveler is asked the same questions. Are the Yankees in Brookhaven? Is the railroad open? At 6 in the evening, an officer brings alarming news. Jackson may be evacuated. Jackson is the capital of Mississippi, a railroad junction, and the key to movement through the state. If Jackson falls, Vicksburg's isolation becomes more than a threat. It becomes a structure. On May 16th and 17, the news hardens. Jackson has fallen. Men confirm it on the road. Fremantle hears of Grierson's raid through Mississippi. Horses taken, railroads destroyed, government property burned, men paroled, no serious resistance met. The point is not simply that damage has been done. The point is that Union movement is becoming faster than Confederate reaction. At Brookhaven, soldiers wait anxiously to rejoin their regiments. Maxey's brigade moves toward Johnston. Then a locomotive arrives with news that the Federals have left Jackson after destroying public property and much private property. That is the window Fremantle takes. On May 18th, he rides an engine toward Jackson with about 20 soldiers. At Crystal Springs, he sees Loring's division crossing the railroad. It has been defeated, lost most of its artillery, and is cut off from Pemberton. Near Jackson, the railroad is destroyed. Sleepers have been piled, rails laid over them, fires lit until the rails bent red hot. Bridges are smoking. Stores and arms burn near the town. Pikes and pikeheads lie in the debris. Then Fremantle walks into Jackson. The city is a wreck. Factories burned, stores gutted, private houses pillaged, churches and hotels smoking. He is nearly arrested as a spy by furious citizens who cannot understand why a British officer would voluntarily appear in a burning city at that moment. Their suspicion is rational. Everything is broken. Everyone is angry. Everyone wants someone to blame. Fremantle is saved by Dr. Russell and Captain Yerger, then taken into one of those strange Confederate scenes he keeps encountering. Danger at noon, hospitality by evening, a ruined capital, then supper, ladies singing, and officers bent over a map. Jackson shows the psychological force of invasion. Fremantle writes that people there had not been especially zealous before. After Grant's occupation and destruction, they were converted into earnest rebels. War did not only destroy Confederate infrastructure, it hardened Confederate identity. Now the crisis is plain. Pemberton has been beaten at Baker's Creek and has retired into Vicksburg. Grant is pressing the fortress hard and has invested it. Johnston has only recently arrived from Tennessee. Loring is cut off from Pemberton. Gist's troops have arrived too late to defend Jackson. Maxey's brigade is moving. Johnston is trying to gather scattered forces and relieve Vicksburg before it is too late. Fremantle rides with General Gist's column on May 19th, then hears the bombardment of Vicksburg at 3 in the morning on May 20th. That sound matters. He is not inside Vicksburg, but the Vicksburg crisis enters the episode as thunder on the horizon. At Johnston's bivouac, Fremantle meets the man many Confederates still trust to repair the disaster. Johnston receives him kindly. He is calm, deliberate, confident, and austere. His cooking utensils are an old coffee pot and frying pan. There is one fork among himself and his staff, ceremoniously handed to Fremantle as the guest. Johnston tells him Vicksburg is in critical condition, closely invested by Grant. Johnston has about 11,000 men with him, hardly any cavalry, and only 16 cannon. If he can get adequate reinforcements, he intends to attempt relief. That word, if, is the whole tragedy. On May 22nd, Johnston explains the Confederate problem in terms Fremantle has already seen on the road. Combinations are difficult because no one can be sure how long troops will take to march a given distance. Straggling, delay, weak discipline, and uneven officer enforcement all make timing uncertain. Fremantle, looking at the army, sees enormous virtues: bravery, firearms skill, patriotism, confidence in favorite generals, sobriety by necessity, and growing discipline. But he also sees why victories have brought fewer benefits than they should. Men throw away blankets on long marches. Officers hesitate to punish. Early in the war, men might simply walk home after a battle, thinking they had done their share. The Confederacy has fighting qualities. Grant has operational momentum. That is the difference. Johnston gives Grant credit for vigor. Grant crossed below Vicksburg, seized Jackson with superior force, cut communications, and invested the fortress before sufficient Confederate force could gather to relieve it. Johnston estimates Grant at 75,000 men, Vicksburg's garrison at about 20,000. Johnston has little confidence in the landward defenses. Vicksburg is no longer just a place under attack. It is a trap being closed. That morning, the bombardment is heavy and continuous. News comes that Union forces are getting up the Yazoo. Walker's division leaves for Yazoo City. Everything is movement, but not enough of it in the right direction at the right time. The Union can pressure multiple points. The Confederates must guess which crisis is decisive. Johnston can see the problem. He may even be the right man to solve it. But he does not have the mass, cavalry, artillery, or time. On May 23rd, Fremantle travels with Johnston toward Jackson. Even the engine needs roadside wood collected by the passengers. Johnston himself works hard enough that his old 7 Pines wound gives him pain. At Jackson, Johnston's force has grown. Loring has arrived with about 6,000 men. Evans's brigade has come from Charleston. Maxey is marching in. Fremantle estimates Johnston may have nearly 25,000 men between Jackson and the Yazoo. The men are in good spirits. Some are clamoring to be led against only double their numbers. It is a perfectly Confederate sentence: courage rising faster than capacity. Fremantle leaves Jackson that afternoon, carrying a pass that proves absolutely necessary. The railroad is in terrible condition. The engine runs off the track after 5 miles. Mail passengers get out and push. On May 24th, he reaches Meridian, then heads toward Mobile. A final absurdity closes the episode. The up train has been stopped because an engineer shot a passenger, unhitched his engine, cut the telegraph and fled up the line. The other passengers barely react. One only remarks that it was mighty mean to leave a train where it might be run into. By then, Fremantle has seen enough to understand the River War, even if he's not seen the inside of Vicksburg. He has seen the Union Navy turn rivers into highways of pressure. He has seen Confederate forts win local victories without solving strategic danger. He has seen refugees flee banks, gunboats haunt the waterways, railroads destroyed, Jackson burned, Johnston gathering pieces after Grant has already shaped the battlefield, and Vicksburg under bombardment in the distance. Gettysburg will come later, and it will become the great image of Confederate defeat. But Vicksburg is the quieter truth. A republic can survive losing a battlefield. It cannot survive forever when its arteries are cut, its armies cannot combine, its rivers belong to the enemy, and its commanders arrive just late enough to understand exactly what should have been done sooner. Next, Fremantle leaves the river crisis and begins meeting the generals of a failing republic, charming, brave, religious, quarrelsome, and not always equal to the machine the war now requires. Subscribe for the rest of Fremantle's journey. Next, the Confederate officer class up close. The men trying to turn courage into a country before the machinery of war breaks them.